14, where we are going to learn about the National Assembly stage of the French Revolution. So let's navigate to our Padlet link. And um, when I say that this is the lesson about the National Assembly stage, if you think back to lesson 5.11, I pointed out that there are 4 stages of the French Revolution. So now we are going to look at stage 1. And for the rest of this week, we will be looking at each stage of the revolution to fully understand and then to be able to assess how revolutionary the French Revolution was. So that's where we're going, just so we know. So we are in stage 1. We're going to be looking at the years 1789 to 1791 today. Let's go back to the pod together. Question 1, what was the Estates General? So all of the questions are sorted by columns today. Questions 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So what was the Estates General? You have a fill in the blank to understand about the forming of the National Assembly. Also understanding the tennis court oath. But what's really important to know is that at the starting stages, and this is a timeline, so we go in order. So in May 1789, the Estates General was a general meeting where representatives from the French estates, the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners gathered. Then, later on that month, the National Assembly is formed. And the National Assembly is formed because the Third Estate feared that they would be overruled and outvoted. Okay, so the Third Estate, the commoners wanted to make sure that their voice was actually heard. And then the next month, in June of 1789, we have the Tennis Court Oath, which the Tennis Court Oath is where the Third Estate, the commoners, promised to not disband until they created a new national constitution. So the commoners' goal before the storming of the Bastille was to form a new national constitution. Please keep this in the back of your mind as we go through the rest of this lesson. Let's go back. Okay, so now, according to the video clip, why was the Bastille stormed? And then you also need to be able to answer whether this is true or false. The storming of the Bastille was a turning point in French history because this was the people's first true action against the French monarchy. So there is a video clip here that you will want to watch, and that will help you get the answers to questions 4 and 5. And then question 6, listen carefully for what the meaning was behind the French people taking apart the Bastille. Okay, moving on to question 7. What is the decree of abolishing the feudal system bringing an end to? So I have created a video right here explaining, but let's just break down the decree abolishing the feudal system. So a decree is as defined up here, just want to show you, is an official order from a government. So it's an official order from the government. Abolish is one of our vocab words. It means to bring an end or to stop. So it's an official order from the government to stop the feudal system. And the feudal system we learned about earlier this school year, but the feudal system is a way of talking about a strict social hierarchy system, which we learned last Monday about the estate system, that, even though it was the 1700s and the Middle Ages ended about 200 years prior, the strict social hierarchy still existed in France. So in August, the commoners want to bring an end to this strict social hierarchy system. Now we move on to question 8. And question 8 is asking us about the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of Citizen. And we briefly touched on this document last week. But this is really a way for the commoners to explain what their goals are and what it is that they want France to look like after the revolution. Moving on to questions 9 and 10. So we jump from August 1789 to October 1789, and we're going to look at the impact that women had on the French Revolution. So there is a video clip that you'll need to watch to be able to answer questions 9 and 10, as we need to understand why it is that the women marched from Paris to Versailles. And then we also need to understand then what that resulted in. So what were King Louis the 16th and his family forced to do? And women were very upset because the the price of bread was very expensive, which we learned last week that bread was the essence of life. Um, and they were also very upset because news broke of a party that happened at the Palace of Versailles where supposedly the guests, the wealthy, were stomping on the new French flag, which had great meaning to the commoners. So the women were very upset, which led to them marching to Versailles, and it ultimately resulted in the people forcing Louis and his family to actually move to Paris so that they would be in the heart of the revolution. And then we come to the Declaration of the Rights of Women and Citizen, which is very similar to the Declaration of the Rights of Man. You've watched this explanation. You should watch this explanation and look in detail. But this really spells out what women want. And then we come, last but not least, which ends the National Assembly stage, we come to the Constitution of 1791, which let's think back. Let's go all the way back here. What was the goal of the tennis court oath? It was that they promised not to disband until they created a new national constitution. So 2 years later, in 1791, on September 3rd, the first constitution was written during the French Revolution, and this constitution abolished the monarchy. Now, in this, I explain that they abolished absolute monarchy. And watch this video to have a full explanation of this document and this explanation. But we see that there is still a king, but the king is supposedly going to be balanced through the separation of powers. And then this brings us to question 13, which question 13 asked us to assess at this point, based off of what you've learned so far, was the French Revolution successful? And then you need to explain. I've provided some sentence starters. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to decide if it was successful. Maybe you think it was somewhat successful, or maybe you don't think it was successful at all. Remember what their goal was at this point, though. I just want to remind you, I'm trying to complicate this for you. And then you need to put some sort of evidence. So you can refer to any one of these columns to explain why you think it was, or was somewhat, or wasn't successful. Okay? I know that there's a lot of questions in this pod, but please take your time. And in these videos, I do explain in great detail if my annotations are not enough. So take the time to also watch those. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And we're going to power through the 4 stages this week. Let's go.